Today, we are with Juan Angel, a licensed marriage and family therapist. Let me read your bio, Juan, quickly, and then we'll jump into our conversation. Sound good?
Perfect.
Okay. While studying pre med, Juan faced a depressive phase that led him to delve into spirituality. This experience ignited his passion for the intersection between spirituality and psychology. During his graduate studies in educational psychology at the University of Florida, he began daily meditation and personal psychotherapy. This journey revealed numerous layers within himself, and these discoveries enhanced his ability to relate to himself, others, and the world. This process started a love affair with healing and personal growth. As a therapist, Juan aims to help people connect with their experiences in ways that bring happiness, success, and satisfaction. For the past 15 years, Juan has integrated mainstream and mindfulness approaches to therapy. He has 2 master's degrees in psychology and has spent over 10 years studying mindfulness, including becoming an ordained monk in Japanese Zen. Juan works with couples on intimacy. He assists men in enhancing emotional intelligence and guides them to better integrate spirituality into their daily life. He is joining us today from Miami, Florida. Welcome, Juan. That was a lot.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Can't wait to see what happens here.
Oh, yes. All of us. You just never know when Spirit's going to jump in and give us some messages. Before we begin, Juan, Noelle, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, first of all, Vaughn has very good boundaries because I didn't know almost any of that stuff that was just shared about him. And I say that because Juan is my therapist. Juan has been working with my husband and I for actually, I think next month is our anniversary. It'll be 3 years. And Juan has my permission if anything feels absolutely right for him to share about myself and not my husband, that he has my full permission and blessing to do so.
Okay. I do want to talk about your monkhood, but we'll get to that later. So you mentioned in your bio that you work with couples on intimacy. And as this podcast is very much focused on intimacy, and we started our first podcast one, and we said, I don't want to be the old lady at 70 who's not having sex with her husband. Period. Like, I still want to have an intimate relationship with myself and my husband, and I want to watch it grow. I don't want to just become stagnant. When you define intimacy, what does that mean?
That's a good question. One things that I sometimes I tell to my couples is that there's a very famous couples therapist called John Gottman, and he has a quote that he says that almost 70% of all couples issues are not fixable. So, yeah, it's pretty bad, right?
What? All right.
I've
So
been in
hang up,
69.
everyone. Stop listening because you're all screwed.
So I believe the number is 69, which I think is funny.
Oh,
69,
that's
yeah.
hilarious.
And so then there's this therapist called Dan Weil, I believe. He's from the Bay Area. And I took a class in my graduate programs where he came once to give us a demonstration. And he was all about helping couples have a conversation, not so much about solving the problem, but about how they talk about the problem. So pretty much that's like my approach. I fell in love with what that means, and I also applied for individual therapy, not so much about the outcome, but more about like how am I relating to my process in going towards that outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so intimacy, I believe it means like creating some sort of a space, a container, some sort of a moment where you are at least willing to drop your guard. So that means like you're willing to not be so blaming, maybe not be so defensive, maybe be less avoidant, and actually start to give me and everyone in the room the possibility to talk from our feelings, from our vulnerability. And if we're able to do that, we can at least get to a conversation that is not so much about who's at fault, who's winning, but more about, okay, this is what's actually happening. I have this emotional experience that's very difficult to navigate with you because you trigger me, because I trigger you. And we at least have an opportunity to understand that and to actually like have a moment of, okay, we're in this together instead of you're doing this to me, I'm doing this to you kind of thing. And which is actually how we approach things in the beginning.
I always talk about the fact that I think trust is way more important than love. Because I don't think that you can love someone without trusting them. Giving your heart to someone and your words are so intimate. The emotions that come with the words and being able to create an environment of safety and vulnerability. I think that's the greatest gift that a couple can have with one another, because then that can lead to physical intimacy and friendship and love and all of that. So,
And truth, and the truth of what is happening between us.
yeah,
Mhm.
I bet you have some stories. As you were like going the blame route, the triggering route, I'm like, oh my God, you probably have some of the most crazy stories. Okay. So, Noelle, I should let you interrupt. Sorry.
Oh, I just was like, oh, I'm writing these things down like blaming, defensiveness, avoidant, check, check for myself. And then also increasing vulnerability, which I agree. It's been an interesting thing navigating that. And I've really learned a lot in working with you about that. And I was just sharing with somebody the other day how the first time I was like really honest in a way I didn't think anybody wanted to hear, you were like, hold on. Like you've never even talked like that before. Like you really highlighted that for me, where I was thinking I was talking in a different way, but it was welcomed. I agree. You do all of those things. That's been my experience for sure.
When you look at couples and how they interact, what it would be like three common things that you see most often with couples that are struggling with the communication, which then leads to the trust, which then leads to the intimacy, etc. But is there something that you could say, okay, yeah, these are the three common things that I see all the time?
There's definitely some patterns. It's a little bit sad to say that there is a pattern in most couples that where there's like the classical pursuer withdrawer dynamic,
Say that
and a
again.
pursuer and withdrawer.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's for some weird joke of God or the universe, people find themselves like in this polarity. Someone is more clingy and the other one is more avoidant. And it's fucked up. I'm sorry. Can I swear here?
You just did. It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's
Fuck
really
yeah.
weird, but most couples have some version of that. Like some polarity that is like really intense and difficult to navigate.
Can it ebb and flow? Can one person be more needy at certain times?
That's a good question. So from the theory of like attachment styles, no, that's those things are more stable. And that's what I've seen too. There might be like an issue where someone cares more about it than the other, but there's usually someone that's more in need of something, and then the other person is more in need of space or not talking about it or washing over it or whatever.
I'm
Activity,
I'm,
whatever.
I'm the runner. I'm the withdrawer.
Me too.
Yeah, okay.
So that is always that there's a polarity always.
I love that.
I'm just thinking about attachment styles. So I've read the book Attach, and I'm a therapist. I've learned about attachment styles. And it seems like there are times when, let's say, the avoidant person can resolve some of those things, and maybe 10 years, 15 years into a relationship, maybe they become more balanced. Has that been your experience with people? Because when Jen is asking about the ebb and flow, I can see like sometimes somebody gives 110%, the other person gives 90, and then that kind of ebbs and flows. I'm just wondering if it does change over time. I remember talking to somebody years ago about attachment styles and how do you get over like the avoidant part. She was a specialist in attachment. She said it could take 9 years. What do you see with that?
I've never had a couple for more than 3 or 4 years. I think 3 or 4 years it's not enough to change an attachment style. In my opinion, it's very hard to change an attachment style only through couples therapy. Part of changing the attachment style, and this is like my style too as an individual therapist, is that the relationship. What I've seen more is this: is I have more of an avoidant in recovery, and I would say I'm an avoidant in recovery. I have more avoidant tendencies, but I know how to talk about my feelings. I understand the importance of talking about my feelings, but I still default to like when the shit hits the fan and it's too intense to check out. My default's still like that. At some point, I will default to checking to avoid. Maybe I'm way more sophisticated and much more vulnerable, and I have a threshold of where I have to be more hurt to get to a place of avoidance than before, but I still will default to avoidance eventually. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So there's not I don't know if there's a complete change, because this is the way I understand attachment styles. It's like your attachment style is pretty much a strategy to cope with the pain that comes out of being in relationship with someone else. Intimacy is painful no matter what. It's like one of my therapists would say, it's a full contact sport.
You're so, never mind. Go ahead.
I'm so what?
70% of you are screwed. It's really hard. Never gonna work.
Yeah, we're all gonna need therapy after
I'm
this
so
one.
tired. Yeah, I'm like, don't come to me. You're gonna get more depressed. Okay.
I would love to add this avoidant in recovery, and I am that too. And I love that you're bringing that up because for people in couples where you know your person, your partner is either anxious or avoidant, it could be a nice way to use like the love language idea of, honey, I understand you want to just get the fuck away from me right now and you should go. And I'll be here when you get back. And but
Yeah.
really working with people to understand your partners, to understand them, and also to have compassion for yourself, because there are very good reasons why we develop these strategies. And when it comes to intimacy and sex and even friendship and family relationships, all of this stuff plays out everywhere. So good to
Yeah,
have a
for
little self-compassion.
My husband and I have been together, Juan, for God knows how long,
25
25 years, and not married, but I remember early on in our relationship, it won't shock you at all. I'm pretty emotional when it comes to relationships. And then when I get angry really fast, and it's a lovely thing. I love living with myself. The thing that we dedicated ourselves to was, I know we need to talk about this. I promise I will come back in 15 minutes. Or we would make an appointment with one another to talk about something that was important. Okay, this is what I've been thinking. I'd like to have a conversation with you about it. However, I don't ever like being like dropped into something without any preparation. And so I would say, I want to talk with you about it. Are you free to talk about it tomorrow afternoon or whatever? So then you're both coming to the table with, okay, I've had time, instead of me just blowing up on him about something and being like, I don't know why I said that. I think preparing each other to have conversations like that is extremely valuable. And
Oh yeah, for sure. You're setting up an expectation that at least there's gonna be an important conversation.
like, I'm coming back to talk about this, or let's set an appointment to actually do it. And you have to
Yeah.
stick to it.
Yeah, and I think finding strategies to solve problems and to communicate. Not all strategies can work for anybody. Like that strategy, for instance, I personally don't like it.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to make an appointment. I just
Yeah. But
for
yeah,
some
it worked
people
for
that
us.
works.
It
Yeah,
still works for
exactly.
us. Like, it's
Exactly.
still to this day, 25 years later, I'll be like, okay, I want to talk with you about this tomorrow afternoon. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the strategy that works more with me, for instance,
Yeah.
and it's not like it wasn't my preference, but it evolved in my relationship with my girlfriend, is to just we have very long texting conversations. So,
Oh.
yeah, and it's
Oh
actually
my God. Nobody could see my face if they're not watching video. I almost like my jaw almost hit the desk.
when we're having difficult conversations, her brain is shooting every single direction, and it's actually I get very frustrated because I have to help her get back on track. But when she's texting, I don't have to do that. It's almost like it's easier for her to communicate through texting. So
Is she
most of our
14?
no, she's not. She's my age. It's just I think it's just ADHD. It's just sometimes people that have ADHD or ADHD
Yeah.
tendencies, when there's a lot of emotional over emotion, their
Mhm.
brain might have a hard time like finding some sort of a theme or staying narrow with with an
Mhm.
objective.
Mhm.
It's not my
Squirrel.
preference. I'd rather
Yeah.
just sit down and talk and have a heartfelt conversation, but I had to accept that maybe this is not necessarily available to me as much as I want.
Wow, that is fascinating. I never would have thought I would have heard a therapist say, yeah, one of the best things that work for us is just really long texts. But it
No,
works.
I had to adapt. Yeah.
And that's, I think, something that is so important about any relationship, the relationship that we have with ourselves. Noelle and I have talked a lot about, you have to adapt as you grow older. You have to adapt as all of a sudden your vagina feels like hot pokers going in and there's no moisture back, and you're all, okay, we have to adapt. Like, we got to, if we still want to have intimacy and sexual interactions, we have to adapt. And I think everything is about finding that balance. When you look at couples, and that intimacy and sexuality, because I want to transition a little bit more into some of that. But how do you see couples adapting? What are some of the things that you've seen? Okay, man, they're doing a really good job. Here is the issue, and this is how they adapt. Because I think that example of texting when you're in an argument, that's adapting, and I wouldn't have ever thought about it. Can you give us some other tangibles? And if you want
Uh,
to talk sexual, let's go. Yeah.
you want
Really
Our
to
shy.
theme song is "Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about." Oh, sorry.
I have a couple that maybe it's I've seen them on and off, and I've seen the woman longer. They're also in California. It's not Noelle, it's someone else. And she has had to adapt big time to the relationship in many ways. Being maybe more tolerant, for instance, to her husband's coping mechanisms that are not necessarily her preference, has been like understanding that this is the way he copes. And even though
Can you
it's
give
not
an example? Let's say it's not this person. What would be an example of a coping strategy that would be really tricky for a woman?
substance use.
Oh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
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 So this potential person would, I'm trying to follow all your therapist lingo jargon and not out anybody. They resort to substance abuse when there's a problem, and then she's had to navigate around that and be like, that's okay. Just come back and talk to me when you're sober.
Or be patient with the process that the partner is going through, and somewhat try to understand, even though there's of course anger, frustration, disappointment, sadness, all this fear, right? But trying to like accept, okay, this is going to, I'm going to have to be okay, and for now that this is what's happening, and because she actually understands why it's happening.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, this is tied to the first question you asked me. I have a lot of the couples that I work with, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, have been couples that where there's substance use. Because one of my specialties is addiction. I've worked in the addiction field for 14 years, and I do a lot of couples therapy in people with their substance use. So there's usually a person that abuses less or abuses a substance that's maybe less harmful. So that person is usually like always grappling with, and I've seen this in more than one couple, grappling with, okay, I don't like that my partner abuses these substances, but I love them and I'm not going to leave them. So what are my boundaries? How am I going to take care of myself? How am I going to understand their process about what they're doing? How much am I going to? Sometimes I've seen couples that they don't make it because of that. Currently, I'm working with a person and she didn't want to stay. So
That's what my go-to would have thought is most people would have just hit a point of I can't
not most people, you
anymore.
never know. It could be
Yeah.
but that's another pattern. So I'm answering two questions in a way. It's like the first one is, that's another pattern, is usually when there's going to be a coping mechanism that's quote unquote more toxic than the other. And how are we going to navigate this? And how is the person that has the least toxic in terms of substances? Because a person can be very controlling and very anxious, and that is very toxic, but they're not doing cocaine. Right? But they're still very toxic. Everything to look perfect, and they're like
I know those people. Oh, I know
so it
those
could be,
people.
yeah. So I'm not trying to say that one is more toxic than the other, but when it comes to substances, unfortunately, like substances do have more of that negative impact on the body, on the mind. It increases conflict most of the time. There's a lot of fights that happen when people use substances. So one of the couples is going to be left like, okay, how am I going to manage this? How am I going to take breaks? Like I've had couples where when one partner says, okay, I'm going to live by myself for 2 months, or you need to leave the house for a month. I've seen that multiple times because they're not breaking up. They're just creating space for that environmental detox, or they're reflecting or some sort of. So that's another pattern that I see a lot, and it is very hard because you never know what one the partner is going to do in terms of, are they going to leave, are they going to stay, are they going to be supportive. I've had clients bring their partner to therapy multiple times for couples therapy because of that specific issue, and the other client doesn't stick to them. So it's actually very complicated. That's definitely, there's substances, there's usually like dynamic.
You mean like when I have too much wine and Alex says, "Are you picking another fight before bed?" That happened last night, and I didn't have too much wine, and I wasn't picking a fight, but those are his key words that he uses. Love him. Okay. All right. So, Noelle, I've been talking a lot. Would you like to ask some questions? I know now she's checking in. She's okay. Who wants to ask the questions?
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
Oh, yeah, there she goes.
My grandmother has a question for you.
Oh, love this.
What would you say is the number one cause for fighting amongst loving married couples?
The number one, oh my God. I don't know if there's a number one, but I'm gonna have to call for help for this one too.
Right. Go ask your spirit, Ohana. We'll wait.
Yeah.
Go into your meditation and see what comes up.
The word that came up actually is maybe expectations. As soon as you gave me permission, actually, you, Jen, that word came up
Good.
immediately.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, because that would be the third pattern, actually. There's a bunch of expectations that are not necessarily understood in the beginning of a couple. And there's love, yeah, of course. I might be a little bit pragmatic, and so I apologize if I come as maybe cold when sometimes I speak, but that's like my personality.
I like it.
A lot of the times, yeah, there's love, but people sometimes get into relationships not just because of love. It's because of how is this person fitting into my life, whether it's emotionally or more logistically. And those couples, when they're not just when there's not there's a lot of this mutual passion, and there's a more functional role that they're playing, there's going to be a lot of challenges on the road that are going to be very hard to navigate. And a lot of what comes up is, what were the expectations of our relationship that we never really explicitly talked about?
So Alex did some therapy. We broke up for a little bit. My husband did a little therapy, and he told me this. I'd be curious to see what your thoughts were. He said that the expectation of who you are is established within something like the first 3 to 4 weeks of a relationship. And I was like, what? I totally disagree with that. Okay, he might be right. So if that's the case, okay, first of all, do you agree with that at all? Is there any thread of that runs true?
I resonate with that. The time frame might be a little bit arbitrary, but yeah, I think it happens soon.
Because then you have these patterns. And then that's why patterns are hard to break, right? It's because that's the person that you fell in love with was also the person that you were not going to love later in life. Those things that you thought were all cute, you're all, I'm going to kill him. I thought it was so sweet that Alex would be late all the time.
I have a couple right now. It was a gay couple, so two women. One woman was very attracted to the other one because of her personality and how she lived her life. And now that's actually later became a threat.
Oh, yeah, I get it. I'm the
That's
attractive
another
one.
polarity. That's another polarity. Like, one is more introvert, more sensitive. The other one is more has a social life, doesn't get caught up in feelings, is just always doing things. In the beginning, it sounds very exciting. It's a beautiful compliment.
Mhm.
But as the relationship goes by, when there's conflict, when there's issues, that dynamic is going to show that, oh shit, like, they're not going to give me the support exactly how I wanted. I think that maybe this is what's coming up for me about couples. There's another therapist that lives in the Bay Area, John Wellwood, and he talks about relationships being like a spiritual practice. I resonate with that 100%. I feel like in my early life, I was doing more of the meditation and a bohemian kind of exploration where I'm just going here and there and meditating and going deep. And now I'm doing more of the spiritual practice through relationship in the last 5 years, more or less. And I think it's harder, it's way more challenging. It's like a PhD in spiritual practice versus the other one. It's like a master's or a bachelor's, you know? Sitting in silence, being with your demons is way easier than sitting with someone and being with their demons and your demons together. It's a completely different, like, you can't even compare, in my opinion. But ultimately, I feel like what happens is that all those expectations that you wanted to get from the relationship get shattered, you know, little by
Yeah.
little. Oh, I can't have sex all the time. Oh, I cannot have threesomes all the time. Oh, I can't have anal sex all the time. I can't, like, oh, my girlfriend's body is changing and I'm not as attracted to her anymore, or my partner's is changing. A lot of what happens is that as we age, sexuality changes, from erections don't last as long, and all these things can happen, right? That's just sexually, but also emotionally, financially. All these expectations, little by little, they don't add up to what we want. What ends up happening, you're faced with having to meet yourself again. Once again, is okay, how am I going to stay in this relationship while I'm not always getting what I want?
I think that's the ultimate question, right? I don't know what you feel about compromise, but when people say, oh, marriage is about compromise, I'm always like, then no one is happy. If every single time you make a decision that both of you are compromising, how long can you do that? Forever? I can't.
It's too ideal, that notion. Yeah.
And I'm going to be mad at least 50% of the time because I'm never getting my way. Or 100% of the time, I'm never really getting my way. And Your partner 100% of the time is never getting their way. That can't work. At least I don't think that can be sustainable. When it comes to what you're talking about, that relationship, yeah, my relationship with myself is so much easier. I don't want to pull my hair out with myself. I'm like, oh, it's okay. It's okay to feel that way. Go journal. If Alex does something like that, I'm like, what? I sound like I yell all the time. I actually do yell quite a bit. I'm a get her off her chester. That's a phrase you guys can use. Go ahead, Noelle.
Quote you on that. So my grandmother actually had another thing she wanted to bring up. I wasn't even thinking about this today in this interview, but I was talking with her this morning and just saying, wow, she was somebody who was known to have difficulty in relationships, but she in spirit is actually coming through very often to help me with my relationship. And it's interesting to me that she brushed up on her knowledge about things, that she brings this wisdom and love. She was bringing up was something about keeping distance. When you've been keeping distance, let's say with your partner and not really having intimacy, what would you say would be a few helpful tips to start bridging the gap of that, to come back to intimacy?
So when you're taking space, you mean, well, how do you come back?
Well, how about the pattern in your relationship started devolving into having less and less intimacy for whatever reason? Maybe a lot of people have children.
Kids.
That's a woman going through menopause, somebody who's just busy and tired, whatever it is. I think that's a common thing where couples who've been together for quite some time,
Yeah.
you maybe fall out of that type of pattern and not relating to each other in that way so much.
Mhm.
And I have said many times in therapy and outside of therapy that I can totally get why divorce seems like a good solution. Because in some ways, having a fresh start with a different person that you don't have the history with, that you don't have to recover from all of the shitty patterns and moments and stuff you remember that you hated or disliked, whatever. Like I could see how getting a fresh start is appealing.
Yeah.
So if we were going to make that less appealing because we could make it more attainable, and achievable to find ways to reconnect to ourselves and our partners. What would you
Yeah.
say would be a few helpful tips?
What's coming up to my mind when I'm hearing that question is maybe less is more kind of thing. Some strategy where you're focusing not so much on fixing something, but on being present and creating those opportunities for connection. What I'm saying might sound a little bit simple-minded, and I think that is probably why I'm saying it. I think because there might be like some graciousness or elegance in that simple-minded answer, which is it's like focusing on being kind and also in creating opportunities of where you have a shared experience that's fun and enjoyable together instead of having to, oh, let's fix this, because that attitude sometimes can actually become more problematic depending on what actually created that space in the beginning, because you're not going to be able to fix it. You're going to have the same fight potentially. If you say, okay, let me just be as kind as possible, as friendly, like friendliness, kindness, and let's do things together that we know we both enjoy. I think those moments of connection are actually going to happen, and they're going to be more simple, and maybe even the very things that actually got you together in the first place.
That's what I was going to say. It's you hear it all the time. Just go back on dates, fall in love again. And you're all okay, but you have to have some expectations within that too. Is yeah, we are going to go ride our bikes around the park because that's what we used to do when we first met. But we can't talk about kids. Parameters
Yeah.
have to be set. We're not going to talk about finances because you know what? Our first 6 months of our relationship, we never talked about finances. Oh, and we never talked about kids. And we had sex.
A perfect example is one day, not too long ago, I was having a massive fight with my girlfriend.
So you're
And
normal. Good. Glad to hear that.
I mean,
Mhm.
very normal. I have
Good.
very intense fights. I did this weird thing. It came out of nowhere. I wanted to leave the house and just do my own thing. And says, you know what? Let's go to this hippie market that I really like. But it was like getting too late, and I was pissed. I says, you know what? This is fucking too late. We can't get to there anymore. And it wasn't her fault. It was her daughter's fault, which is like my stepdaughter at this point. We live together. And I wasn't I was like, fuck, we can't go there. It's too late. So we said, let's just go paddle boarding instead. So we took our paddle boards and went to a beautiful spot down in the Keys, and we paddle boarded like crazy. I think we burned 1,000 calories that day paddle boarding. I'm not exaggerating. At least 800 according to my Apple Watch. And at the end of the day, it was great. I wasn't upset. We had dinner in a great spot. I was feeling connected to them. All that negative energy was completely gone. Being in nature with her is one of the things that has always created our connection.
That's a good
So
reminder for everyone.
Yeah.
but I didn't do it as a strategy. I just did it
Hmm.
as like, let's just do this,
Hmm.
let's, and they followed.
Yeah.
They said, okay, let's do it. We did it, and it was great. I saw sharks and stingrays and turtles, and it was amazing.
Oh, oh my gosh. I want to get in an argument with you. And then I'll follow you paddleboarding. It's great. It's a really good strategy, though, is getting outside, but also having physical activity. I know
Yeah.
that when Alex and I are in a funk or he's stressed out or I'm stressed out or whatever, I will often just say, take your bike 15 minutes and go ride up this huge hill
Nice.
as fast and as hard as you can. Feel like taste the blood in your mouth. Have you ever had that when you're working out so hard? You're like, uh. When I ski, that happens. I'm always, I am working too hard. Our iron taste in my mouth. Okay, I digress. I told you, Juan, I was the crazy one. So,
I
anyways,
see.
I think getting in nature and having opportunities for exercise is great. This is my last question because I actually have to go pick up my daughter. This is a yes no question, but I'm going to ask you to expand upon it. Do you ever think it's important just to have sex? Just have sex. Just have sex.
That's a good question. I mean, I don't think it's a yes or no question. I think it depends.
Of course, it depends. And you're a therapist. Of course, you're going to say that. So, when, in your opinion, would it be a good thing to just say, fuck it, let's just fuck? Now, I'm not that type of a person. I don't really like that. I don't like angry sex. I don't like it. It doesn't feel good for what I'm looking for. However, I know that there are some couples that really, like, I was just walking with a friend the other day and she said, sometimes we just need to have sex.
Yeah,
Like, we're
that has been
fighting. We just need to have
that has been
sex.
me with my current girlfriend, like always ready and available no matter what's happening.
She is sexually.
We both were actually, and actually I became less in the last year or so, but she's always available no matter what, no matter how bad the fight is, no matter what stage of the fight.
Are you bringing her to orgasm vaginally all the time? Or do you go down on her? I know that's a very personal
She loves
question.
asking these questions.
She figured out how to do it, and she doesn't really need me, to be honest.
Yeah.
She knows how to move.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
We'll
Can
have
I
her
get
on.
her number?
sure.
She's our next interview.
I think it depends. One partner might not be available for a variety of reasons, emotional or physical, and if you just can't force that. It's like all talking is always not gonna be good. Having sex is not always gonna be good. Taking space is always not. No strategy is going to work always. You have to be like in tune. What strategy right now? What is going to be best? And maybe there's no strategy, and we just have to ride it a bit. Just be patient. Just do your thing. You ride the wave of disconnection. That might be the hardest part for couples sometimes is how do you ride the wave of disconnection
And stay confident that it will come back. And it does. In 25 years of being with Alex, we've had those moments where I'm like, ugh,
or be okay with the
ugh.
uncertainty without
Yeah.
having to fix it. Be okay with the uncertainty. We'll see, what happens with this, but I'm not going to firefighter mode and have to fucking fix it because I'm not okay with it. That's worse
Yeah.
to me.
I do think meditation has helped a lot with that with me because you can go into your own space and be like,
That's
Jen, you don't need to get all crazy about this. This too will pass. You'll find your way out. Go ahead, Noelle.
I also can see how you would need a certain level of feeling secure within yourself. Because if you're worried about the relationship ending for all kinds of reasons, like really worried, I really depend on this person for X, Y, and Z, or I can't imagine not being with them because it's been so long. It's really hard to let that just be. Maybe the first 10 years or 8 years of my marriage, when we had an argument, there was a part of my mind that always went to, okay. And we were married. If we weren't married, it would have been probably a lot louder. But that always came up. Now it's different, being more secure within myself and in the relationship. I have more space for that now, but that is hard earned, I think.
it sounds that to me, Eugene, you have like a relationship where there's a lot of confidence that things are going to work out, right? And that those
Yes.
and there's a
There's
lot of
never
those.
a doubt.
Yeah,
We're going to
and
get
there's a
there.
lot of beautiful, and there's a lot of relationships like that. That's like a secure attachment relationship, you could say.
Yeah.
But not everybody is in that boat, and I would say most people are actually not in that boat.
Yeah, I know.
So for those people, it's almost like being okay with the disconnect to an extent, being okay with the uncertainty, with the lack of safety, and the vulnerability that comes from I'm not in control. I'm not in control about whether you're going to accept me or love me for who I am, but I'm in control about how I'm going to show up here.
Mm.
That's so good for people to hear. You're in control of how you show up.
That's what
Yeah.
you are in control of that 100%. You can cultivate the ability to show up in relationships.
Unless you're perimenopausal and then your hormones are all fucked and you have no
You're
control. I'm just,
And give
you
up
know.
all hope and time. Yes.
And then you're one of the
But you can at
70%.
least cultivate, the attitude to show up for those moments. Okay, right now my hormones are out of whack. Brace yourself, buddy.
Yeah. Oh, I did. I had that full conversation with him. I was like, I need you to be more on top of things that you can control that really make me mad. In other words, it took him 2 hours to make dinner the other night. And I was freaking. We didn't eat until 10:45. I know that we eat normally late, but it was like 10:45. And I'm like, whatever. But so I had an aha moment, I don't know, in meditation or something. And I came up to him a couple days later and I said, hey, I have going through a lot of non-control. All of a sudden, I'm in the middle of an argument, like screaming, and I'm like, who is this person? And I said, if you can look at your life and our life together and determine the things that you actually can influence to avoid me going off the rails, I would really appreciate that. And he was like, okay, yeah, I get it. I don't know. We
That's
do our
great.
best. When you were saying be kind, one thing that Alex and I decided a long time ago, and we still have to work on this, is giving each other the benefit of the doubt.
Mm.
It's so easy to jump to, why would you say that? Or being hurt. And give me the benefit of the doubt. I wouldn't ever say that with intention of hurting you. And that one has helped us a lot. Yeah.
Beautiful.
All right. All right. My therapy session is done. I love it that you joined us. And I wanted to bring full circle. You talked in the beginning about being adaptive and that intimacy requires us to all ebb and flow with one another. And you said that throughout the whole conversation is it's about understanding who we are, adapting with who we are, understanding who our spouse or partner is as best we can, and adapting as best we can. I think you've done a really beautiful job of giving us a lot of examples for that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for all the questions. It's beautiful to be able to talk here with you guys.
Yeah, you seem okay. I like you. You can come back.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
anytime. We can talk about anything. Hopefully.
I know we should talk about anal sex. You just dropped that one quickly and then just kept going. And I was like, okay, anal sex. He just dropped it. I was thinking about blowjobs, the frequency of blowjobs in the beginning of a relationship versus 25 years later.
This is fast decliner, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My husband does not have to complain. I'm just going to say
That's
that. Except for this morning. I was like, no. All right. Gotta go.
On that note.
Yeah, if you want to
Good
hear more
day.
from Juan, we'll put all of your information in the podcast notes, Juan. But what's the best way for someone to reach out to you?
through my website. It has my phone number, my email.
Repeat that for everyone who's listening.
JuanAngelTherapy.com.
Perfect. Juan Angel or angeltherapy.com. Perfect. Thank you so very much for spending time with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.